Hey guys, this is video lesson 4.1, and today you are going to learn about how to estimate multiplication of fractions. Now, as we go through this lesson, there are three types that you are going to have to understand, and I have them written here, and you could always pause the video and write this down. Type 1, which we're going to start with example 1 and 2, is a fraction of a whole number. Type 2, in examples 3 and 4, is how to estimate a fraction times a fraction. And type 3 is how to estimate mixed number multiplication. And all three of these types require different strategies. So we are going to start with examples 1 and 2 to show you how to estimate a fraction of a whole number. So in example 1, it says estimate 1/4 times 13. Now remember that the times means of, so this is the same as 1/4 of 13. Now the trick to doing these is you must make the whole number compatible with the 4. So basically, we're going to change 13 to a number close to 13 that divides by 4. And that closest compatible number would be 12. Now, we just have to estimate 1/4 of 12. And to find 1/4 of a number, you just take the 12 and you divide by 4. And your estimate would be 3. Okay, let me show you another example in example 2. Now, this one is estimating 2/5 of 11. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to find the closest number to 11 that's compatible with this 5. And just think of your counting by 5 numbers. Think 5, 10, 15, 20. So the closest compatible number is 10. So now I have to take that 10 and divide it into fifths. So 10 divided by 5 is 2. But this time I have 2/5. So if 10 divided by 5 is 2, I now have to multiply it by 2 to get 4 as my estimate. All right, so now we're going to go down and we're going to try some. So I'd like you to try B with me, and then I'll have you do A and C by yourself. So again, we're going to do B with me. So the first thing we're going to think about is finding the closest number to 13 that's compatible with that 6. So think about that. Think of numbers that 6 goes into. And if you chose 12, you are correct. Now we have to find 5, 6 times 12. So to do that, we take that 12 and we divide it by 6. So 12 divided by 6 is 2. Now since we have to estimate 5/6, we have to now multiply that 2 by 5 and we get 10. Now I'm going to take you through it again just so you see. We change 13 to 12 because it can divide by 6. 12 divided by 6 is 2. 2 times 5 is 10. All right, now your job is to try A and B. Or I'm sorry, A and C. So do A and C by yourself and restart the video when you're done. Go. Okay, let's see how you did. So in A, the closest compatible number is going to be 15. So now here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my 15 and divide by 5, which is 3. Now, since it's only 1/5, your answer is going to be 3. Now, if you do the whole thing, 15 divided by 5 is 3. 3 times 1 is still 3. So our estimate for A is 3. And for C, we have to find a compatible... I didn't mean that to happen. We have to find a compatible number for 23 that divides by 4. So the closest one is going to be 24. So I do 24 divided by 4, which is 6. But then I have to take that 6 and multiply it by 3. And 6 times 3 is 18. All right. So that is going to be how you estimate a fraction times a whole number. And that is all about making the whole number compatible. But now we're going to go on to the next page and we're going to show you how to estimate a fraction times a fraction. Now here's the thing. When we estimate fraction times a fraction, every fraction is either going to round to 0, half, or 1. Because think of a fraction on a number line. Unless the fraction is improper, the fraction is going to be between 0 and 1 on a number line. So when we estimate, all we're doing is deciding, is that fraction closer to 0? Is it closer to half? Or is it closer to 1? Plus, these numbers are easy to work with when we multiply. So let me show you in problem 3. I'm actually, just to make this one, I don't want to use 1/3 because that's kind of a tricky one to start with. So I'm going to say, let's say 1/5. All right, so now I have to decide if 1/5 is closer to 0, half, or 1. So what I usually do is I call these guys my helper fractions. So I know 0/5 is 0, and I know 5/5 is 1 whole. Halfway would be 2.5 fifths. So what is 1/5 closest to? Is it closest to 0, half, or 1? Well, 1/5 is really close to 0/5, so the first number is going to round to 0. Now here's a cool thing. Since it's going to round to 0, 0 times any number is going to be 0, so our estimate's going to be 0. So it really doesn't matter what we round 7/9 to, but let's go through it anyway. So now, let me erase this slop so you can see. Now I'm going to decide if 7/9 is closest to 0, half, or 1. So I know 0/9 is 0. I know 9/9 is 1. And halfway between 0 and 9 is 4.5/9. So I have to decide what's 7 closest to. Is it closest to 0, half, or 1? And 7/9 is closest to 9/9, which is 1. So if I were estimating this problem, it would be 0 times 1 is 0. All right, let me show you another one in example 4. Now in example 4, I have ninths again. So for 1/9, let me just write it over here so it's easier to see. So 1/9, is it closest to 0/9? Remember, half is 4.5/9, and a whole is 9/9. So if you're thinking, 1/9 is really close to 0/9. So again, the good thing about this estimation is because 0 times any number is 0. You know it's going to be 0. But let's talk about 4/5. So let me switch to pink. We have 4/5. Is that closest to 0/5? 5/5 is a whole, or halfway would be 2.5 fifths. 4/5 is really close to 1 whole. So in this one, you would have 0 times 1 is 0 as well. All right, so let's go down to the practice problems. We're going to do one of these guys together, and then I'm going to have you try the other two. So by the way, you don't have to write the helper fractions, but if you have trouble seeing it, you might want to. So what I'm going to do for D is I have to decide if 5/8 rounds to 0, half, or 1. So I'm going to write it down here where it's bigger. So remember, 0/8 is 0, 8/8 is 1, 4/8 is half. So what is 5/8 closest to? It's really close to 4/8. Remember, 4/8 is half. So 5/8 is going to round to half. Now, how about 9/10? 9/10, is it closer to 0/10, which is 0, 10/10, which is 1, and half would be 5/10? Well, check it out. 9/10 is right next to 10/10, so that's going to round to 1. So here is my estimated problem, half times 1. And any number times 1 is itself, so half times 1 is half. All right, so now here is your job. Your job is to do E and F. Remember, for each one, each fraction is either going to be 0, half, or 1. And you could write down the helper fractions if you need to. Okay, pause the video and do E and F. Go. All right, let's see how you did. So I'm going to start off with 5/6. Give me a second to get some workspace done here. That was quick, wasn't it? All right, here's my workspace. So to do problem E for 5/6, I have to decide, is 5/6 closest to 0? Remember, that's 0/6. Half is 3/6, or a whole, which is 6/6. So 5/6 is really close to 6/6, so that's going to round to 1. Now 9/10, what's that closest to? So here's my 9/10. Is that closest to 0/10? 5/10 is half, or 10/10 is a whole? Well, 9/10 is very close to 10/10, so that's also going to round to 1. So then I just have to multiply. 1 times 1 is 1, and that's my estimate for that one. Okay, now on to problem F. Let me clear my workspace. Okay, so for F, we have 5/6 of 1/9. Now, do you notice that 5/6, we already had that in E, so 5/6 we know rounds to 1. Now, what about 1/9? So here's my 1/9. I know 0/9 is 0. I know 9/9 is a whole. And half would be 4.9/9 or 4.5/9. So 1/9 is really close to 0/9, so that's going to round to 0. So when I estimate, 1 times 0 is 0. Okay, so that's how you estimate a fraction times a fraction. Now, what about mixed numbers? Now, mixed numbers, I think, are my favorite of doing them. So in this one, it says estimate the area of this flower bed. And if you look at the flower bed, they give us our 2 dimensions here. And since it's a rectangle, we should know to find the area, we just multiply the length times the width. Now, this said to estimate, so we don't need the whole number. Now, here is the thing. When we estimate mixed numbers, we round to the nearest whole. So, for 14 7/8, that's either going to round to 14 or 15. We don't worry about halves because that makes the multiplication complicated. 6 1/8, is that closer to 6 or is that closer to 7? So, watch how I decide. So, I have 14 7/8. So, the difference is, if 7/8 is closer to 0, the mixed number will stay a 14. If 7/8 is closer to 1 whole, it's going to bump the mixed number up to 15. Now, if you know 4/8 is half, that's halfway between 0 and 1, then you know 7/8 is higher, and it's going to bump 14 7/8 up to 15. Now, for 6 1/8, the question is 1/8 closer to, is it below half or above half? So if I know 4/8 is half, since 1/8 is less than half, I should have written 1/8, sorry, then that means 6 1/8 is going to stay the same. So I have 15 and 6 for my dimensions. Now to estimate, we just multiply 15 times 6. And don't be afraid to do 15 times 6 off to the side. No big deal. And I get 90. So my estimation would be 90 square feet. All right, ladies and gentlemen, so that's going to be it for the practice video. Now, there were the 3 types we had to do. Remember, we estimated mixed numbers just now. We did a fraction times a whole, and we did fractions times fractions. So as you're going down and doing the problems below, if you were absent, I would go back and watch parts of the video if you're a little bit stuck. So keep that in mind. Also, if you have any questions, make sure you ask me in class. Thanks a lot for watching. Talk to you later.